Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're digging into a pretty interesting Q&A document. It gives us a real glimpse into current affairs in the mining industry for 2025. Our goal here really is to pull out the key takeaways for you, whether you're deep in the industry, an investor, or maybe just curious about these big global shifts. Let's jump in.
Yeah, and what's really striking about this source is how clearly it maps out the impact of, global events and tech changes.
Mm-hmm.
These aren't abstract ideas anymore. They're actively reshaping, really foundational industry. We'll look at the main pressures, but also the opportunities popping up.
Kicking things off then, energy. The document makes it quite clear. Energy prices. Still a big pressure point heading into 2025. Geopolitics playing a major role there.
Mm-hmm. Definitely still a headache.
So how are mining companies reacting? Seems like a major push towards efficiency and alternatives, renewables especially, like solar and wind.
Exactly. And the strategy there is smart. It offers that dual advantage. They're cutting operational costs, which is, huge in this sector.
Vital, yeah.
And at the same time, they're lowering their emissions profile. But it's not always straightforward. There are real challenges in places where the energy grid is, let's say, unreliable or just very expensive. That complicates things.
Right. Practical hurdles. Okay. So from energy sources, let's pivot to the materials themselves. Critical minerals, lithium, cobalt, nickel, rare earths. The Q&A really puts them front and center for the green transition, doesn't it?
Absolutely central. Powering EVs, batteries, all are high-tech gear. And it sparked this, global scramble to secure reliable supply chains.
Yeah, you see that mentioned. The document points to things like new processing facilities in Canada and the U.S.
Right. Specific moves designed to lessen the dependence on China, which has historically had such a strong position there, largely due to getting in early, maybe less red tape initially. But even with these new initiatives, bottlenecks in supply and definitely the environmental questions around extraction, those are still very much hot topics.
And that links nicely to the next point, right? How environmental rules are actually pushing innovation.
It seems counterintuitive sometimes, but yeah.
Tighter scrutiny is basically forcing the industry towards more sustainable ways of doing things. We're seeing more money going into site reclamation, fixing up the land afterwards.
Better water management, lower impact tech. It's becoming standard practice, or at least the goal. And it's that interesting paradox the source highlights. Stricter limits, say, on waste or emissions in Europe or North America, yes, they increase operating costs, no doubt. But they also force companies to innovate, to find cleaner, smarter ways to operate, like using advanced sensors maybe to catch pollution issues instantly instead of dealing with a big cleanup later.
So necessity is the mother of invention, basically.
Pretty much, yeah.
And speaking of invention, digital transformation, that's another huge theme. AI, automation, drones, real-time data. It's all happening now.
Oh, it's in full swing. And these aren't just, fancy add-ons. They're genuinely improving safety records and really boosting productivity.
Can you give an example from the source?
Sure. It mentions autonomous haul trucks, takes people out of potentially dangerous driving situations, and AI-driven exploration tools. These systems sift through massive amounts of geological data to pinpoint potential deposits much more accurately, sometimes finding things previous methods just missed. Companies embracing this stuff, they're getting a real edge, especially in those really remote or difficult locations.
Makes sense. Okay, last key area, emerging markets. The document notes that places like Africa and Latin America with their rich reserves are still attracting investment.
They definitely are. The potential is huge, and it's a significant but, that interest is often balanced against political risks and sometimes unpredictable regulations.
So investors are becoming more cautious.
More discerning, I'd say. The Q&A suggests they're increasingly looking for transparency, genuine community engagement, and solid ESG performance. That's environmental, social, governance. It's less about quick wins now. The trend seems to be towards building long-term sort of equitable partnerships, a more sustainable approach to development, hopefully.
So pulling it all together, what really strikes me from this deep dive is how mining, which sometimes gets seen as, a bit old school, is actually right there on the front lines, tackling these massive global issues, energy independence, sustainability. It's quite a dynamic picture.
It really is. And if you zoom out, you start thinking, okay, how are these shifts in mining going to ripple outwards? Yeah. How will they affect the tech we use every day, or maybe even the geopolitics around who has access to what resources in the years ahead?
Exactly. So the big question for you listening is, what does all this spark for you? What new questions pop into your head about the future of energy, technology, and, the very stuff that builds our world?